Do you find yourself scrolling through social media or playing video games for hours on end? If so, you may be suffering from a dopamine imbalance. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that plays a key role in the brain's reward system. It's released when we experience pleasurable activities, such as eating, sex, or winning. Dopamine helps us to learn and remember these activities, so that we're more likely to repeat them in the future. However, too much dopamine can be a bad thing. When we're constantly exposed to high dopamine activities, our brains become desensitized to them. This means that we need more and more dopamine to feel the same level of pleasure. This can lead to a number of problems, including reduced motivation. When we're not getting the same level of pleasure from low dopamine activities, we're less likely to do them. This can lead to problems in our work, school, relationships, and overall well-being. The good news is that there's a way to reset your brain's dopamine system and regain your motivation. It's called a dopamine detox. In a dopamine detox, you abstain from all high dopamine activities for a period of time. This can be for a day, a week, or even longer. During a detox, your brain has a chance to heal and become more sensitive to dopamine. If you're feeling unmotivated, a dopamine detox may be just what you need to get your life back on track. In the previous section, we saw that dopamine is a neurotransmitter that plays an important role in the brain's reward system. When we experience pleasurable activities, such as eating, sex, or winning, dopamine is released. Dopamine helps us learn and remember these activities, so we are more likely to repeat them in the future. However, too much dopamine can be a bad thing. When we are constantly exposed to high dopamine activities, our brains become desensitized to them. This means that we need more and more dopamine to feel the same level of pleasure. The dopamine trap. This phenomenon is known as the dopamine trap. When we are constantly exposed to high dopamine activities, our dopamine receptors lose their sensitivity. This means that we need more dopamine to feel the same level of pleasure. Imagine you start playing a new video game. At first, the game is very exciting and you play for hours on end. However, after a while, the game isn't as exciting anymore and you have less motivation to play. This is because your dopamine receptors have lost their sensitivity to the game's rewards. The brain's dopamine system is a thermostat. The brain's dopamine system can be likened to a thermostat. A thermostat tries to keep the room temperature at a balanced level. If the room temperature is too high, the thermostat tells the air conditioner to turn on to cool the room down. If the room temperature is too low, the thermostat tells the heater to turn on to warm the room up. The brain's dopamine system works in the same way. When we're exposed to high dopamine activities, such as video games or social media, the brain tries to keep dopamine levels in a balanced state by reducing the sensitivity of dopamine receptors. Dopamine resistance and loss of sensitivity to low dopamine activities. The result of this process is dopamine resistance and loss of sensitivity to low dopamine activities. This can lead to a variety of problems, including lack of motivation, distractibility, increased risk of addiction. Conclusion: the dopamine trap is a real phenomenon that can have a number of negative consequences on our lives. Being exposed to high dopamine activities too much can lead to dopamine resistance and loss of sensitivity to low dopamine activities. This can lead to a variety of problems, including lack of motivation, distractibility, and increased risk of addiction. To avoid the dopamine trap, it's important to limit exposure to high dopamine activities on a regular basis. These activities can include video games, social media, high-calorie foods, and drugs. If you feel like you may be caught in the dopamine trap, you can use a dopamine detox to reset your brain's dopamine system. A dopamine detox involves abstaining from all high dopamine activities for a specified period of time. Here are some specific recommendations for avoiding the dopamine trap. Limit your screen time. This includes time spent on social media, watching TV, and playing video games. Get enough exercise. Exercise releases endorphins, which have mood-boosting effects. Spend time in nature. Spending time in nature can help to reduce stress and improve mood. Rewiring the brain, dopamine detox. In the previous section, we saw that the dopamine trap can lead to dopamine resistance and loss of sensitivity to low dopamine activities. This can lead to a variety of problems, including lack of motivation, distractibility, and increased risk of addiction. Dopamine detox. Dopamine detox is a strategy to reset dopamine levels and restore motivation. During a dopamine detox, you abstain from all high dopamine activities for a specified period of time. These activities can include video games, social media, high-calorie foods, and drugs. One-day detox. A one-day dopamine detox is a good starting point. During one day, you can abstain from all high dopamine activities and focus on low dopamine activities instead, such as exercise, studying, or spending time with loved ones. Gradually increasing duration. If you feel comfortable, you can gradually increase the duration of your dopamine detox. For example, you can start with 2 days, then 3 days, and so on. Planning and structuring activities. During a dopamine detox, it is important to plan and structure your activities. This will help you to stay away from the temptation of high dopamine activities. Conclusion: dopamine detox can be an effective way to reset your dopamine system and boost motivation. If you feel like you are caught in the dopamine trap, dopamine detox is a valuable option for you. Rewiring your habits, replacing instant gratification. In today's world, it's easy to get caught up in instant gratification. We're constantly bombarded with stimuli that release dopamine, a neurotransmitter that's associated with pleasure. This can lead to a number of problems, including procrastination, addiction, and a lack of motivation. One way to break free from the cycle of instant gratification is to focus on activities that release less dopamine, such as studying, exercising, or pursuing hobbies. These activities may not be as immediately rewarding, but they can be more fulfilling in the long run. As you increase your participation in low dopamine activities, they will become more rewarding. This is because your brain will start to associate them with positive outcomes. You can also use high dopamine activities as rewards for completing low dopamine tasks. This can help to make the low dopamine tasks more appealing. Dopamine choices, long-term goals versus instant pleasure. The goal of dopamine detox is to empower you to choose your own sources of dopamine. When you make healthy choices, you're more likely to achieve your long-term goals and experience true satisfaction. Of course, there's nothing wrong with enjoying instant pleasure from time to time. But if you find yourself constantly seeking out short-term gratification, it's important to take a step back and reevaluate your priorities. I encourage you to experiment with dopamine detox and find a balance that works for you. The key is to find a way to enjoy the journey as much as the destination.